Long ago, in the ancient city of Alba Longa, King Numitor, a descendant of the Trojan hero Aeneas, reigned. Numitor had a daughter named Rhea Silvia, a beautiful and pious young woman. Her younger brother, Amulius, envious of Numitor's power, hatched a plan to wrest the throne from him. With the help of his allies, Amulius succeeded in deposing Numitor and locking him in prison. He then seized the royal treasure and proclaimed himself king of Alba Longa. Amulius knew that Numitor had several sons who could claim the throne in the future. Therefore, he had them all assassinated without mercy. However, he had one problem left: Rhea Silvia. Amulius feared Numitor's daughter would marry and have children who might challenge his authority. To prevent this, Amulius decided to make Rhea Silvia a chaste virgin, a priestess consecrated to the cult of the goddess Vesta, the protector of the home. The Vestal virgins had to keep the sacred fire of the temple of Vesta burning and keep a vow of perpetual chastity. If any of them broke her vow, she was condemned to die buried alive. Rhea Silvia reluctantly accepted her fate and devoted herself to serving the goddess Vesta with devotion. However, one day, while on the banks of the Tiber River, collecting water for the temple, she met the gaze of Mars, the god of war. Mars was captivated by Rhea Silvia's beauty and approached her, intending to seduce her. Rhea Silvia resisted, but Mars used his divine strength to subdue and lie with her. Thus, Rhea Silvia became pregnant with twins Romulus and Remus. Months passed, and Rhea Silvia's belly grew, revealing her condition. Amulius learned of the situation and became furious. He accused Rhea Silvia of having violated her vow of chastity and locked her in a dungeon. He then ordered that the twins be thrown into the river Tiber so that they would drown. Amulius thought that in this way, he was rid of the threat posed by the children of Rhea Silvia without having to shed blood directly and provoke the wrath of the gods. However, on the day they were born, the Tiber River was swollen by the rains and flooded the banks. A servant of Amulius, charged with carrying out the order, could not get near the riverbed and left the basket with the children where the water would wash it away. The basket floated down the river until it stopped in a backwater near a fig tree called Ruminal. A she-wolf who had lost her cubs heard the children crying and approached them. Far from attacking them, the she-wolf welcomed them tenderly and offered them her breast to feed them. The twins Romulus and Remus had miraculously escaped death, thanks to the intervention of the gods and the compassion of a servant of Amulius. According to some authors, the she-wolf was a revelation of the goddess Luperca, wife of Faunus, the god of the forests. According to others, she was a prostitute named Lupa, who lived in a nearby hut. Be that as it may, the she-wolf offered her breast to feed them and save their lives. A woodpecker, the twins' godfather, consecrated to Mars, cared for them and brought them food. The Romans considered the woodpecker a sacred and augural bird representing strength and courage. Meanwhile, a shepherd named Faustulus, who worked for Amulius, happened to pass by and saw the scene. He was surprised to see the twins with the she-wolf and decided to adopt them. He took them to his hut, where he lived with his wife Laurentia, and named them Romulus and Remus. Faustulus and Laurentia raised them as if they were their children, not knowing they were of royal blood and destined for great things. Faustulus was Amulius's chief shepherd and was in charge of the care of the king's flocks. The shepherds lived in the countryside, near the river Tiber, and were devoted to raising sheep, goats, and pigs. They were rough and brave men, accustomed to defending themselves against the attacks of wild animals and bandits. Shepherds had a simple and free life, but also a hard and dangerous one. Romulus and Remus grew up among the shepherds, learning the art of herding, hunting, fighting, and survival from them. They became two burly and fearless young men, united in body and soul. They were respected and admired by the other herders, who followed them as leaders. They were also generous and just and helped the weakest and most oppressed. They often confronted the bandits who plagued the region, stealing livestock and extorting money from the peasants. Romulus and Remus fought them with courage and cunning and snatched their booty, which they distributed among people experiencing poverty. Thus, the twins became famous and loved by the people who regarded them as heroes and protectors. But they also earned the enmity and hatred of the powerful, who saw them as a threat and an obstacle. Among them was Amulius, the usurper king, unaware that Romulus and Remus were his nephews and the sons of Rhea Silvia, whom he had locked in a dungeon. Amulius feared that the twins might rise against him and overthrow him, so he sent his soldiers to capture and kill them. But the twins were more potent and cunning than the soldiers, and they managed to escape his traps and ambushes. Moreover, they had the support of the shepherds and the people who defended and hid them. Romulus and Remus did not know who their birth father was, nor were they descendants of Aeneas, the Trojan hero. Nor did they know that their grandfather Numitor was the legitimate king of Alba Longa, or that Amulius imprisoned their mother, Rhea Silvia. They only knew that they were the sons of the she-wolf and the woodpecker and had a mission to accomplish. Romulus and Remus avenged their grandfather Numitor and mother Rhea Silvia and restored order to Alba Longa. But they were not content to stay in the city of their ancestors. They wanted to create their city, where the she-wolf had suckled them. So, they headed for Mount Palatine, where they had found the basket that had saved them from death. There, they decided to find their city, which would be the origin of the Great Rome. But before starting the construction, they had to choose where to build its walls. Romulus and Remus had different opinions on the matter. Romulus preferred the Palatine Hill, which was higher and more central. In contrast, Remus preferred the Aventine Hill, which was broader and more fertile. They agreed to consult the gods' omens to resolve their dispute, observing the birds' flight. According to Roman tradition, birds were messengers of the gods, and their number, direction, and behavior could reveal their will. Romulus and Remus each climbed their hill and waited to see the divine signs. Remus was the first to see 6 vultures fly over the Aventine Hill, and he ran to tell his brother. But Romulus claimed to have seen 12 vultures over Mount Palatine before Remus. The brothers then argued about who had seen the birds first and who had seen more. Each claimed the right to found the city on his hill, and neither would yield to the other. Finally, Romulus decided to act on his own. It began to trace the city's perimeter with a plow, following the contour of Mount Palatine. The plow was a sacred instrument, symbolizing the foundation of a new community. Romulus thus marked the boundary of his city, which he called Rome, and warned that no one was to cross that boundary on pain of death. Remus, who disagreed with his brother's decision, mocked him and his city and jumped over the ditch the plow had made. Romulus, enraged, killed him with a blow, saying, "So let him perish whoever trespasses beyond my walls." Thus, Romulus became the first king of Rome, founded on April 21st, 753 before Christ. Romulus was left alone, without his brother, but with his city. However, he soon realized that he needed more inhabitants to make it prosper. Therefore, he opened the gates of Rome to anyone who wanted to live there, regardless of their origin or status. Thus, Rome was filled with people from all over, especially fugitives, exiles, enslaved people, and criminals who were looking for a new opportunity. Romulus gave them refuge and granted them Roman citizenship, but he also imposed laws and duties on them. Among them was the duty to defend the city from their enemies, who soon appeared. The neighboring peoples of Rome, such as the Sabines, the Etruscans, the Latins, and the Volscians, did not take kindly to the new city's growth, threatening their territory and power. In addition, Rome had a severe problem. It lacked women. Most of its inhabitants were men who could neither marry nor have children. Romulus tried to solve this problem by asking nearby towns to give him some of their women. Still, they refused, fearing that Rome would become stronger and more numerous. Romulus then devised a plan to obtain women by force. Romulus organized a feast in honor of the god Neptune and invited the neighboring towns to participate. He promised them that there would be games, banquets, and fun. Many accepted the invitation and came to Rome with their families. Among them were the Sabines, proud and warlike people living in the mountains. The Sabines brought with them their wives and daughters who were very beautiful and virtuous. Romulus received them courteously and made them sit in the stands of the circus where the games were to be held. When the games began, Romulus gave an agreed signal, and his men rushed upon the Sabine women and abducted them. The fathers and husbands of the women resisted, but they were forcibly expelled from Rome. Thus, Romulus achieved his purpose of obtaining wives for his citizens. Still, he also gained the hatred and revenge of the Sabines, who vowed to recover their women and punish the Romans. The Sabine women at first wept and mourned their fate, but then adapted to their new life. They realized the Romans were not evil, but treated them respectfully and affectionately. Moreover, many of them fell in love with their abductors and had children with them. Thus, the Sabine women became the first mothers of the Roman nation and the mediators between the two peoples. Meanwhile, the Sabines were not resigned to losing their women and prepared a war against Rome. Their king, Titus Tatius, gathered a large army and marched towards Romulus. The Romans prepared for battle and went out to meet him. A bloody and fierce combat ensued, in which both sides suffered many casualties. Romulus and Titus Tatius faced each other personally and wounded each other. Victory was undecided, and neither king wanted to yield. Then, something unexpected happened. The Sabine women, who had followed their fathers and husbands to the battlefield, interposed themselves between the two armies and asked them to cease fighting. They reminded them they were kin and were not to kill each other. They begged them to make peace and to unite as one nation. The Sabine women moved the hearts of the combatants, who laid down their arms and embraced. Romulus and Titus Tatius made peace and agreed to rule the city together, which was enlarged to include Mount Quirinal, where the Sabines settled. Thus, Rome became more prominent and robust, thanks to the intervention of the Sabine women, who were honored as the founders of peace and concord. Romulus divided the citizens into 3 tribes: the Ramnes, the Titians, and the Luceri, according to their origin. The Ramones were the descendants of the Latins who had followed Romulus. The Titians were the descendants of the Sabines who had joined him after the war, and the Luceri were the descendants of the Etruscans and other peoples who had joined Rome later. Each tribe was subdivided into 10 curiae, which were political, military, and religious. Each curia had a name, a territory, a temple, a priest, and a chief. The curiae met in an assembly called Comitia Curiata, Rome's legislative and judicial body. The Comitia Curate elected the king, magistrates, and priests and approved laws and treaties. Romulus also created the Senate, the Elders' Council, and the city's wisest. The Senate comprised 100 members called senators, representing the 100 curias. The Senate was the advisory and executive body of Rome. The Senate advised the king, the magistrates, and the comitia to curate and administer public affairs, such as war, peace, finance, and religion. Romulus also established the consulate, which was the supreme magistracy of Rome. The consulate consisted of 2 consuls elected each year by the Comitia Curia from among candidates proposed by the king. The consuls had the power to command the army, to convene the Senate and the Comitia Curate, and to exercise justice. The consuls were to act in agreement and share power, and could veto each other's decisions. Romulus also founded the pontificate, the college of priests in charge of the Roman religion. The pontificate consisted of 4 pontiffs, elected by the Comitia Curate, among the candidates proposed by the king. The pontiffs had the power to regulate the cult, interpret the omens, fix the calendar, and preside over the funeral rites. The maximum pontiff was the head of the pontificate and the supreme priest of Rome. Romulus also created the augury, the college of priests consulting the will of the gods. The augur was formed by 4 augurs, elected by the comitia and curated among the candidates proposed by the king. The augurs had the power to observe divine signs, such as the flight of birds, lightning, thunder, and dreams, and to pronounce the auspices and favorable or unfavorable forecasts for human actions. Under the leadership of Romulus, Rome became a regional power. The city became a center of commerce and culture and attracted people from all over the world. Romulus died in 716 before Christ, but his legacy survived. Rome continued to grow and prosper, becoming one of the most powerful empires in history.